Hello and welcome back to Supposedly Fun. My name is Greg and I am here today to do a Friday Reads video where I wrap up the week in reading and talk about any bookish stuff that has gone on. There's actually a lot that I want to talk about today, so I'm going to try to get through it fairly quickly without making this a very long video, but we will see how that goes. I did finish 3 books this week, which is pretty good, especially if you follow along and you know that reading has been a little bit difficult lately. I've managed to push through. It is interesting, and not to get sidetracked since I do have a lot of other things I want to talk about, the concept of reading slumps. Like, I know people who follow who have had like genuine reading slumps, and I always feel guilty because when I refer to myself as sort of slumping, what I really mean is slowing down. And I think I've managed to avoid actual reading slumps because I have a channel and there's that sort of accountability. If I have a channel, I need stuff to talk about. And I think that's the only thing that has kind of made me feel like I need to push through and try to find ways. So a lot of the time when I refer to myself as being slumpy, what I really mean is I'm slowing down and I am sort of desperately trying to keep my interest up in things. But this was 2023 in general has been a slumpy time for me. And I've managed pretty well, all things considered. So, but I finished 3 books this week, and that feels really good. And I really am looking forward to talking about all of those books. We'll get to that a little bit later when we do the actual Friday Reads portion of the video. The first thing I want to talk about is, of course, the Pulitzer Prize. Actually, no, before we get into that, I want to talk about the t-shirt that Joel brought home, or surprised me with yesterday. It actually came in the mail. He was traveling for work and got home yesterday, so we were able to open the package. It says, "Canine cancer sucks." And if you follow along, you know, I lost Guinness to a brain tumor, another dog, last year, and Jamie has a nasal tumor right now, and she just finished radiation treatment for it. So Joel got these t-shirts for both of us. The proceeds went to support canine cancer research. There's an Instagram handle right here. I'd rather be with my dog. I'll put a link to their site down below if you would like to support them as well, because obviously this is something that is near and dear to my heart, and I like the shirt. So I have that. Jamie's doing well. I should mention, she's actually here in the room with me. She's lying on the floor just behind my chair. I am not going to put her in a video right now because I want to let her recover a little bit. We are 2 weeks out from her final radiation treatment. They said you should allow like 3 weeks to see side effects. And so far, the worst we've seen is itching, and there has been hair loss, and that's why I don't want to put her in a video. She did have, we've had to put like antibiotic ointment on. On the right side, she has lost hair from like the bottom of her eye to the tip of her nose, and on the other side, just under her eye a little bit. But she's a strong girl. She's doing really well. I'm very proud of her after everything she's been through across her whole life. So she's doing well. And again, thank you for all of the kind words and the support. Hopefully soon she will be able to appear in a video. I mean, not that I don't think she's presentable, but she's been through a lot. I don't want to, she doesn't like appearing in videos, so I don't want to put her through that on top of everything else. Now let's talk about the Pulitzer kind of quickly. The first thing is that it's been really fun that somebody else posted a video where they did Pulitzer predictions. They tagged me in it, so I saw it. So if you've done predictions as well and I haven't seen them, tag me in them, please, because I love to watch them. Ben Reed's Good did Pulitzer predictions. I'll link that video down below. It was just really fun for me to watch a video where somebody else talks about the Pulitzers, because I feel like I'm always pushing for them. I know it's difficult because the Pulitzer Prize doesn't do a long list, and it's a very different organization from other book awards like the Booker or the Women's Prize. So they don't do a lot of advance notice. They don't do like the social media thing. They don't produce videos or interviews but that's also because the Pulitzer has a lot of different categories. So if they do that for fiction, then they have to start thinking about doing it for the other categories, and not just in arts, but what about journalism? It would be difficult for them to do it, and I get that. So there's something more to latch onto with other major prizes like the Booker, the National Book Award, and the Women's Prize, but I like the Pulitzer. It's the first major book award that I followed. And I've been chatting Pulitzer Prize with a bunch of people, actually, and it's been interesting. After I did my Pulitzer Prize predictions video, which will be linked down below, the announcement is Monday, so we're really getting there. I started thinking, I should have just gone with my heart, because I did something a little different this year. In past years, because it's so difficult to predict, I've kind of gone with my heart. And usually there's something that I would like to see win that seems like a really good contender. So I just predict that. And it hasn't really worked for me. So this year I said, you know what? I'm not going to vote with my heart, which means I'm not going to predict Demon Copperhead. I predicted Trust by Hernan Diaz. Spoiler for the video. And then I started thinking, I should have just gone with my heart. And then recent events have kind of made me think that it really will be Trust. And I was probably right to go in that direction. But I don't actually know, because the recent events that make me think it will be Trust are that there have been bank failures in the United States. There's an economic crisis. There's, all this stuff about the debt ceiling. Doesn't directly correlate to what Trust is and what it's doing, but it feels like there are circumstances in the news that would make someone feel like Trust is a sort of urgent story, because it does deal with incidents that may or may not have led to the stock market crash that caused the Great Depression. So bank failures are something that kind of, if you're thinking about book prizes, it would probably make you think that's an urgent book to reward. And we'll see if that happens. Because the thing is, I don't know at what point the Pulitzer jury submits a list of finalists to the board. They may have done that a while ago at this point. So they may have submitted finalists before anything happened with these banking failures. It could have happened a while ago, because I assume the board wants time to be able to sit with the books that they are going to choose, but they have to do that across multiple categories in the arts and letters section, and they have to do that with the journalism choices as well. So they probably need a lot of time. And as such, there's a chance that the jury they may have chosen other 3 books because they wouldn't have seen these circumstances that make Trust feel like something really topical. Of course, ideally book prizes are more about the best book, but anyway, don't want to wade into that. So it's just interesting. If Trust is among the finalists, the Pulitzer board is making decisions, or has been making decisions probably while all of these news items have been going. So a lot depends on whether or not Trust is in the 3 finalists. But I think if it is, the news is making a really good case for why it would be an interesting choice. But anyway, so stay tuned for my Pulitzer Prize reaction, which will be on Monday. I don't know what my workday looks like ever, but I am going to try to watch the announcement live, and hopefully I will be able to have a reaction posted very quickly afterward. But I never know what my workdays are going to look like until the day of. So, and frequently, even in the morning, I don't know what the afternoon is going to look like. So I'm going to do my best. Monday, there will be some kind of reaction video, hopefully. We'll see. Also, Joel was traveling for work this week. And just really quickly, I wanted to mention a store he found in Livingston, Montana. It's called Wheatgrass Books, and he saw a bookstore, and we had just celebrated Independent Bookstore Day and spent money. So he was really just going to kind of note down, what interesting store we should visit. And then he saw a flag in the window that said trans rights or human rights. So he went in, and it turns out they're going to have a drag story hour. So really cool store. When he went in, he was sending me photos. It's a beautiful store. He got me 2 books from there, and actually, no, 3 books from there. And we may try to make an appearance at the drag story hour, because if you're not following news, news is terrible everywhere. But Montana is really in a spot right now, and I think part of it is probably in response to the controversy over the drag story hour at Helena Pride last year. If you follow along, Joel and I went and we supported Montana Book Company with their drag story hour for that. But basically, there is a law that is trying to ban drag shows, period. So if we can't stop story hours, we're going to ban drag performances in total. And I think if a drag performance is going to be in a bar, it'll probably be fine. I don't know the ins and outs of it, but basically this is specifically to stop drag story hours. And it did pass, I believe, but I don't know if it's gone into effect yet. And it's gross. It's awful. So I want to make sure we try to show up to support them in their endeavor. And hopefully it won't be too controversial. But yeah, really cool. And just a really great store. And Independent Bookstore Day itself was really great. I always tell myself this year, I'm going to take photos. I'm going to get video from the inside of the store. And Montana Book Company redid their bookshelves this year and that sort of reorganized the store. So the register moved to a different location and is more accessible for people in wheelchairs now. And I really, as such, wanted to get more footage of it because people always ask me for footage of the store. And every time I go, I forget because I have such a good time in the store talking to the people, and just they're such a delight. But then I leave and I think, I didn't take any pictures. I didn't get any video. So someday I'll make it happen. But Independent Bookstore Day was a good success. And I only went to the one store, but we did call Flint Hills and we got an order from them in Kansas. So all in all, really successful day. And I hope you had a good Independent Bookstore Day as well. The only other thing to talk about before we get into the actual Friday Reads portion of the video is Carol Shields' prize for fiction announced a winner. That's not great grammar, but you know what I'm saying. I had mentioned in a previous Friday Reads that I saw an interview with Sean the Book Maniac and the CEO of the prize, and I was really interested in following it. The winner was When We Were Sisters by Fatimah Asghar. I had noticed this book when it was on the long list for the National Book Award, and then it didn't make the short list, and in all of the end of year Sturm and Drang, I kind of forgot about it. So I'm glad that the Carol Shields Prize brought it back to my attention because it does sound really interesting. Here's what they say about it. It was the winner. A debut novel written by a skilled, assured hand, When We Were Sisters absolutely dazzles. Following 3 orphaned Muslim-American siblings as they navigate great loss and painful comings of age, Fatimah Asghar weaves narrative threads as exacting and spare as luminous poems, their fragility a mere guise for their complete, unflinching indestructibility. Noreen, Aisha, and Kausar show us what they truly need to survive, even when everything seems taken away. Asghar's novel is a tour de force, at once stirring and beautiful, breathtaking in its lyricism, and head-turning in its experimentations. The actual blurb about what the book is says this heart-rending lyrical work traces the intense bond of 3 orphaned siblings who, after their parents die, are left to raise one another. The youngest, Kausar, grapples with the loss of their parents while charting her own understanding of gender. Aisha, the middle sister, tries to hold on to her sense of family, and Noreen, the eldest, does her best in the role of sister mother while creating a life for herself. When We Were Sisters tenderly examines the bonds and fractures of sisterhood, names the perils of being 3 Muslim American girls alone against the world, and ultimately illustrates how those who've lost everything might still make homes in one another. I mean, I don't know why I allowed all of the end of year stuff to push this off of my list of options because it sounds so good. I put a hold on it at the library. It'll probably be available soon. I probably won't get to it until June. We're going to talk about my May. Whew, it's going to be a lot. But yeah, I immediately I'll put a link to the Carol Shields Prize announcement down below if you'd like further information about this title or the other books that were on the list. It seems like a great book. I'm really excited to read it, and I would love to hear your opinion if you have read it or if you're interested in reading it as well. I've kind of raced through a lot of things because I want to give myself a little bit of time to talk about the books that I finished this week because, well, one of them I'm only going to talk about briefly, but you'll find out why. But I feel like I have a lot to say. So let's just get to the Friday Reads portion of it. The first book that I finished this week was City of Night by John Rechy. This was one of the selections for the Queer TBR Tackle that I am co-hosting with Jen the Librarian. I'll put a link to information about it down below. And this was one of Jen's picks for a queer book that has been on her shelf for the longest. It's a TBR Tackle. Tackle the books that are already on your shelf. If she hadn't selected it, it would have been one of mine that has been on my shelf for a long time. And I actually listened to this on audio. I think that was helpful for me because a bunch of people in the Discord group got stuck at a certain point reading this, and there's no plot, essentially. And I admit, I kind of struggled at a certain point. I mentioned in my last Friday Reads that I felt like I thought I had been further along. I thought, well, I must be about halfway through, and it turned out I was about 30% of the way through, and that's never a good thing when you have that much left and you think you must be almost done. It's not as long as it seems, actually. It's a big chunky book, but it's also because this edition of it has a lot of like original manuscript stuff, which is fascinating. But it's not 500 pages. It's about 446. And I was really convinced that I was going to think, it's too long. It's good. It's too long. But the events of the final part of the book really elevated it a lot for me. And a lot of these slow movements start to pay off. Like, you kind of need all of the detail in order for that to pay off, because he reflects on each place he has been, on the people that he has met. And to me, there's a really big payoff. That doesn't mean that some of it doesn't feel like a slog, but there's a really good payoff. Like, it's a very strong ending, I think. And it's a very interesting book. Kind of very surprising that it was published in 1963, because it deals with a lot of topics in a nuanced way that you wouldn't expect from the time. Of course, there are parts of it that are dated as well. But basically, as our unnamed protagonist moves about the world, he starts in El Paso, where he is originally from. He goes to New York and becomes a hustler. And then he travels from there. He goes to LA, to San Francisco. He's really briefly in Chicago. And then he goes to New Orleans. And in each of these locations, he meets people. And basically, instead of having a plot, he just spends time with these people, kind of gets to know them, and they all have various backgrounds. They have very different experiences of the world and the queer community, such as it was at the time. And it's really interesting. He spends time with people who hustle for money, which is kind of code for they prostitute themselves to men, but are convinced that they're not gay. And the ways in which people justify engaging in gay sexual behavior without considering themselves to be anything other than a masculine, and I'm putting that in quotes because, it's a construct. But anyway, it's really interesting. And he meets people who are transgender, although they wouldn't have understood themselves to be transgender, wouldn't have defined themselves using that word at the time. People who are drag queens, and just a wide variety of people, wide variety of backgrounds. And it's a really interesting book from that perspective. Again, I do think the audio was very helpful for me to get through it. I can absolutely understand why some people got stuck at a certain point and hadn't picked it up in a week or two. A lot of people are either going to be finishing it this month, or I don't know, maybe they'll just drop it completely. But I think there's a huge payoff at the end, for me at least, to the point where I think I originally gave it a 5-star rating on Storygraph, and then I thought about it and thought, I don't know, should I lower it? Sometimes I get really emotional about how I react to books, and then reassess later and think, I should have made that a little bit lower, or, I was unfair to that, maybe a little higher. But I'm sort of stuck, because on the one hand, the fact that it felt like a slog, does that mean I should make it lower? But also, it's a classic, and I think it deserves a status as being a classic, and I really think the ending paid off. So I don't know. I haven't decided yet. Maybe I did actually lower it. I don't remember. But that was City of Night, and I'm so glad I finally got around to reading it, and look forward to talking about it more. The next book that I finished in the past week was The Grapes of Wrath by John Steinbeck. And in the mold of how I've been handling books that are for my Pulitzer Prize project, I'm not going to talk too much about this book here. I am already hard at work creating a post for my website that is a Pulitzer Prize deep dive. I always use those as the basis for my video Pulitzer Prize deep dives. And we'll talk about what I'm going to have coming up, but I need to read one other book before I can finalize that. But I'll talk much more about the book, what I thought of it, and what I think it means as a Pulitzer Prize winner, and all of that soon. Stay tuned. The thing I really want to mention here is that on Instagram yesterday, I posted a story when I finished it, because I began and ended this book in the same way. When this started as a buddy read with Joel in February, and he finished it in February, and I only just finished it now. I put it down for a little bit. And when we started, I started the introduction to this edition of it, this Penguin Classics, and it immediately reminded me that the title comes from the song, The Battle Hymn of the Republic. And I made Joel listen to the Judy Garland version of the Battle Hymn of the Republic. She performed it on television shortly after JFK was assassinated. And it is honestly one of the most iconic television performances of all time. I will accept no debate about that. It's astonishing. Gays choose icons wisely, just saying. And I'm not even a huge fan of the song, but her performance gives me chills. It's amazing. I'll link it down below. And I ended the same way. So I posted about that on Instagram. I just did a quick video of the book and added the song of Judy Garland's version of it. And I got a bunch of comments from people who had no idea that the title of the book comes from the Battle Hymn of the Republic. It does. And because a lot of people were surprised by that, I thought I would just mention that here. So the line in the Battle Hymn of the Republic, it's right there at the very beginning. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. He is trampling out the vintage where the grapes of wrath are stored. I didn't really sing that, but I apologize because I'm not a singer at all. But anyway, that's where the line comes from. John Steinbeck's wife at the time recommended the line to him, and he loved it. And what he said, and this is all I'll say about the book, and I'll save the rest of my thoughts, is he loved it. When he was writing to his editor, he said he loves it because it's a march song, and this book is a march itself. And I think it's really fitting. I did not actually know that the Battle Hymn of the Republic came from the Civil War, and it actually makes parts of the songs make sense. I was talking with Doris from Aldi Books about that at a certain point, and it's interesting the journey that song has taken, because it went from that to being the basis of the name of this novel. Anita Bryant used it at rallies when she was touring around trying to promote anti-gay agenda. And anyway, I don't want to get bogged down, but just I figured that is what I'll talk about here. I'll talk much more about the book. I'm glad I finally got around to reading this as well, and I'm glad I finally finished it, and look forward to talking more about it in the future. I actually started and finished another book this week, and I had forgotten that I had a hold on it on Libby. So when Joel and I did our April wrap-up and talked about our May plans, I mentioned that a hold had just become available, and it's The Furrows by Namwali Serpell. I had kind of been hoping to read it before the announcement of the Pulitzer on Monday, because it is, I think, a solid contender for it. It was one of the New York Times top 10 books of the year. So just in case, I kind of wanted to cover my bases and read as many potential contenders for the Pulitzer as possible. So when the prize is announced, hopefully I will have read the winner. And that's kind of why I rushed into this one. Instead of putting it off and saying, this might not be a good time. It's actually the perfect time, because the announcement is coming on Monday. So I listened to it. And part of me was wondering if this would be a bad book for me right now, because it really heavily deals with grief. And if you follow along, you know, losing Guinness, my dog, last year has been really hard on me. It's been really hard on Joel. And then, of course, Jamie being sick this year has been really hard all over again. And it has sort of triggered a lot of the feelings about losing Guinness, because we did take him to the same hospital. We did attempt radiation, but his tumor was very aggressive. The one that Jamie has is much more treatable. So it's just bad luck. And, anyway, point just being, I'm going through my own grief cycle, and it's being exacerbated by my other dog being sick, and we are approaching the 1-year anniversary of losing Guinness. So part of me was really thinking, is this a bad time to read this book just from that? And I felt good enough to figure, I'm going to dip my toe in these waters. If I feel like I can get through it, I will. I'm glad I did it. So the premise of this book is that Cassandra, who goes by C in large parts of the book, loses her brother when she is 12 and he is 7, and she is with him when it happens. You don't really know what happened. It's kind of like in the movie The Dark Knight, the Joker tells people how he got the scars several times, but the story is always different. That's kind of how it is here. And one thing that C says again and again is, I don't want to tell you what happened. I want to tell you how it felt. So how she lost her brother is ultimately not as important as the loss itself. And that feels appropriate. I feel like a lot of people refer to him as drowning, and I think that's because that is the first story that you are told, and it is the one that is kind of on the cover. So, but again, this is a book where you don't really know what's true, and that's a really interesting approach. And I think for the most part, it works. It also really deals with the sort of cyclical nature of grief. And I saw a review online that I don't remember where, but it talked about how traditionally, like the Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, that she created the stages of grief, denial, anger, I'm getting them out of order, but you know what I'm talking about. And how a lot of people say that isn't necessarily true. In this book, kind of, certainly there is denial, certainly there is anger, but it talks about them as cyclical because this grief carries with C you follow her well into her adult life, and it's still with her and kind of comes about in surprising ways. And, I think that is very true and very astute of Namwali Serpell. She has some really great observations about that. And there's a real dreamlike quality to the book because, again, you don't really know what's true and you don't quite understand what happens sometimes. Like, there's a sort of repetitive structure in the first half of the book where something will prompt C to remember her brother. Usually she sees someone who reminds her of her brother. And there are bizarre accidents that happen. And again, you're never on sure footing with this book. And I think that can be frustrating depending on how it's done. I think Namwali Serpell executes it perfectly in the first half of the book. And I'm sort of torn because I think the book kind of falls apart in the second half. And part of me wants to just not talk about it. But I don't think it's really a spoiler. So here's all I'm going to say about the second half of the book, because I think you should go on a journey with this book yourself if you're inclined to read it. The second half of the book introduces another narrator who is not a member of C's family. And that is actually just kind of going back a little bit. That's another thing that's really interesting. It's almost Rashomon in the way people deal with grief and anger and the trauma of losing a family member unexpectedly. The way C reacts, the way her father reacts, the way her mother reacts, and the denials, the obfuscations, the blame. It's fascinating. But anyway, so someone comes into the narration who is not a member of the family. And I think the book only really worked when it was dealing with people who were in the family. There's a connection to her brother, maybe, and I don't want to say anything more about it. But to me, it doesn't work. The second half of the book, this introduction of the person, does not work. So that's kind of what I will say about The Furrows by Namwali Serpell. I don't want to get too much into the second half of the book, which makes it tough because the second half of the book is where I have all of my problems and where I think it really fell apart. And I just feel like I can't talk about it beyond what I already said, and because I don't want to give anything away. But the first half of the book was an interesting ride, but I feel like it's a really interesting beginning, and so much of it depends on where it goes, how the rest of the book is handled. And unfortunately, to me, the rest of the book kind of fell on its face, and that kind of almost negated. But there are some really stunning observations in this book, even to the point where at one point C is talking to her mother, who she blames for what happened because her mother wasn't there. She feels like, I was 12. I shouldn't have been responsible. I should not therefore be responsible for what happened. But then there's a revelation that maybe her mother does blame, and shifting perspectives. It's really interesting how your experience is different from somebody else's experience. I really appreciated that. At the same time, there are some descriptions in this book that I really did not like. The only one I can think of off the top of my head is that it's raining, and she refers to the leprous appearance of the sidewalk, and it's like, I don't know. things like that. Some of the ways that the things are described in the book feel like reaches to me, and that didn't vibe with me. But really, it's just, to me, the second half of the book. If you've read The Furrows, I would love to hear your opinion of it in the comment section down below. I have not started any other book yet. So here's my dilemma. Oh, by the way, I did return Pyre, which was longlisted for the International Booker. I had gotten it from the library, and based on the feedback I got from it, it just felt like, maybe not right now. And it was due back, and I have so many other things on my plate that it just didn't feel like a time for it. So here's my current dilemma. Which one of these am I going to start with? I'm going to start with this one. I really want to read Whose Names Are Unknown by Sonora Babb so I can complete my Pulitzer Prize deep dive on The Grapes of Wrath, because if you follow along, you've heard this, but basically Sonora Babb was working as a social worker in government camps during the Great Depression. She is originally from Oklahoma. She ended up in California, as many people did. And she was doing interviews with people in the camps and submitting her notes to her supervisor. Her supervisor passed her notes to John Steinbeck. She did not really know that. And the foreword to this book kind of goes into that a little bit, and I think that will be interesting to read that, because I think it's kind of unknown if John Steinbeck used her notes or not, but what is known is that she wrote this novel based on her experiences talking to people and seeing how they were living in the camps and how they were treated in the camps. And a publisher had agreed to publish it, and then The Grapes of Wrath was published and became a massive success. And the publisher came back to her and said, we're not going to compete with that book. So they shelved it. And this was only published in 2004. And I just feel like it would be an interesting addendum to my conversation about The Grapes of Wrath. And it is on audio. So I'm thinking, even though I have a copy of the book, I'm probably going to make this my next audiobook, so I can knock it out and finish my journey with The Grapes of Wrath. But in the month of May, I also need to read A Room with a View by E.M. Forster. This is part of the E.M. Forster read-along that is happening across 2023. I'll have information about that down below as well. And I would love to do this on audio. I read it in physical form the first time, and the problem is there are a lot of different audios. I tried samples of a lot of them, and they sound terrible. Somebody recommended one in the Discord, and I looked it up, and it's only available in the United States as a CD. I don't even own a CD player anymore. So if you have a recommendation for an audio version of A Room with a View, let me know down below, because the ones that I'm seeing are awful sounding. So I might actually have to read the physical book for this, which is going to be interesting, trying to fit it in. So I need to do that in May. I really want to get back to the love songs of W.E.B. Du Bois, reading the Netanyahus and doing my deep dive on it, which is already posted at this point. I'll have it linked down below. Really made me want to get back and finish this book. I was only halfway through when I put it down. I had gotten a copy from the library, and I was going through it very slowly. So I want to get back to it and actually finish it. But by June, I need to pivot to Pride Month reading. So I'm on a timeline. We're still early in the month of May, so there should be plenty of time. But I have all of these other things. Like if I have to read this in print, then I need to hold on this, maybe. I really want to get back to it. So there's that. And then Joel just finished Becoming Ted by Matt Cain. And I'll let him tell you his thoughts on it when we do our wrap-up for May, and he'll be back for that. But he really loved this book. And the fact that he really loved it kind of makes me want to prioritize it. It is only available in the UK. We ordered a copy from there, so I don't have an audio option for this, which means, again, I would have to read this in print. So basically, my audio options are limited. It's 456 pages. So I have likely 3 print books that I need to cram in this month, and I'm trying to figure out priorities for them. If Becoming Ted waits until June, it's fine, because it is a queer book and it would fit with Pride Month reading. But the way Joel was talking about it has me really excited to read it. But I am just thinking as I'm talking that this one is probably going to get lower priority than these two, just because Becoming Ted can carry over to June, and these can't. Although, actually, I mean, technically, E.M. Forster is gay, or was gay. So that could carry over. The problem is, for the queer TBR tackle, for the E.M. Forster read-along, it's supposed to be read for the month of May. It's a very casual read-along. If it does carry over into June, it'll be fine. But I'd rather finish it this month. So I don't know. I'm going to figure that out. And we'll see where I go next. I'm going to have to spend some time today thinking about it. So that's everything. That's a lot. Actually, I've talked about a lot in this video. I'd love to hear your thoughts on what I've read. Anything else I talked about in the comment section down below. I'd love to hear what you have been reading and watching and all of that stuff. And let me know if you have any last minute thoughts about what might win the Pulitzer Prize for fiction on Monday. Stay tuned for my reaction for that. I'll hopefully get it posted as quickly as I can after the announcement has been made. Anyway, as always, I really appreciate your time, and I will be back. Until next time, happy reading.